Yes, the doc is in the hot seat. Now, each year we recognize World TB Day on March the 24th. This annual event commemorates the date in 1882, in fact, when Dr. Robert Koch announced his discovery of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, the bacillus that causes tuberculosis, or TB as we know it now. And this morning we are joined by our HIV and infectious diseases expert, Dr. Emil Reid, ahead of World TB Day, to unpack the importance of awareness around tuberculosis. It's crazy to me that when we talk about 1882, that we are still in 2022.
Shocking.
Grappling with something that surely we should have control of this now. Why is this such an important day?
Well, every year we try and commemorate TB and World TB Day. And the reason for that is to create public awareness, number one, and an understanding around probably the biggest infectious diseases killer in this world. And what is shocking is that we sit with round about 5,000 deaths per day of tuberculosis. We sit with roughly 40,000 new cases per day, and that despite a cure being available, despite prevention strategies being available, we're still struggling 100 years later.
I mean, I immediately start jumping to a socio-economic reason as to why this is panning out in this way and not being a scientific reason. But let's get to the heart of the matter first, because I know this can be a devastating disease to contract, and it's ugly. It really is an ugly disease. So what happens within the body when someone contracts TB?
So Mycobacterium tuberculosis is airborne, it's aerosolized. So we breathe it in. So the port of entry is usually our lungs. And in the lungs, we have cells we call the macrophages. They are almost like Pac-Man.
Nom, 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 nom.
When the bacillus actually goes into the lung. And they also create some sort of inflammation in order to contain this Mycobacterium in the lung. So what it does, it actually builds a wall around it so that it cannot spread further. When you have a poor immune system, though, it gets into the bloodstream, it can spread to your brain, causing meningitis, can spread to your eyes, can spread to your kidney, can spread to your back. We call it Pott's disease. So TB can actually affect every part of your body. And I mean, for me, in the last 25 years, I think I've seen TB in every organ of the body.
I mean, I've seen an X-ray of a lung that's been heavily affected by it, the amount of scar tissue, the cysts that form. It's crazy. So what normal course of treatment do we follow? You say there's a cure. What do we do?
That's part of the problem, because our current normal tuberculosis treatment is roughly 6 months. So based on your weight and your age and also your comorbidities, you have to take between 3 and 5 tablets per day for the first 2 months.
Sure.
After the first 2 months and your sputum get tested negative, your X-ray shows improvement, your medication gets swapped to another different type of anti-tuberculous treatment, which will be 3 tablets a day for another 4 months. So treatment of normal tuberculosis, 6 months.
So you've got to be in it for the long haul.
You need to be in it.
And that's when you start looking at people who don't have access to clinics every day, where they've got to travel 50 kilometers to get to their nearest healthcare practitioner. This is where I think it becomes a socio-economic issue. What happens if you don't adhere to that protocol?
The big problem we have with antibiotics, remember we always speak about antibiotic resistance, and that's why we as ID docs normally ask people, please complete your treatment. And the issue is when people default treatment or they're not taking their treatment on a regular basis, that's what will happen. They develop what we call drug-resistant tuberculosis, whether it is multi-drug resistant, extended drug resistant, so you create a monster if you do not comply with treatment.
And then are there treatment options available once we've progressed to that extent?
Absolutely, there is, and that's one of the difficult things as well, because should you then go on drug-resistant TB treatment, it requires probably more tablets, you know, and in some instances up to 20 tablets a day, and the duration of treatment will then be, on average, the short course of drug-resistant TB is 9 to 11 months, wow. And a normal course of a drug-resistant TB is 18 to 20 months. Hence the reason for people at some stage to stop their medication, not take it.
Well, and you can imagine then the strain, the additional strain that puts on the medical systems, on practitioners, on
exactly.
Those communities itself. This all highlights just how important it is to focus on World TB Day. It's happening in 2 days' time, but we're casting a light on it right now. If you've got any comments or questions for the good doctor, let us know on the Expresso Morning Show Facebook page. We are continuing our TB discussion in just a moment.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for keeping it locked as we continue to discuss World TB Day this morning. Of course, it's happening. The annual commemoration happens on the 24th of March. Now, HIV and infectious diseases expert Dr. Emil Reed is spending a little time with us this morning and sharing his extensive knowledge and experience on this particular topic, because this has been your bread and butter, not to make light of it, for many years, 25 years. You say you've
Absolutely.
found TB in literally every organ. So let's look at it from an external now. Warning signs, red flags. What are those danger signs that I need to be aware of, and when do I need to act on it?
Absolutely. I think when it comes to looking at symptoms and signs of TB, the most important one is cough. And usually when people present with cough, get to the doctor, they give them antibiotics. Yeah. Not looking for what is the cause of the cough. Most of the time it might be a viral infection, but if your cough persists for longer than 2 weeks, you need to get an X-ray, you need to go for sputum analysis to exclude that you have tuberculosis. Also associated with that, usually people develop what we call fever and drenching night sweats. So in the morning when they wake up, the bed is wet.
Sodden, okay. Not just a little, but a lot.
Drenching night sweats. They lose weight, they lose appetite, and some of them might develop glands in their neck, under their arms, etc. So those are the warning signs to get checked out.
Okay. And the body does react quite hectically to it.
Absolutely.
6 months to when you've got, talk about the drug-resistant TB, better part of 2 years. Yeah. Why such a long drug process? Why is it so hard to kill these little buggers?
Well, the first problem was we actually allowed these buggers to mutate. So obviously when you have a cure, there's people not adhering to treatment, which one can understand. They get mutations, they get resistance, and then you actually have to offer a different regime of treatment. And also what happens is when you have TB inside your body, they exist as rapid dividers, medium dividers, slow dividers, and the drugs are actually there to address different dividing tuberculosis
drugs, yeah,
in your body. And then you also get what we call latent TB, when you're actually infected with TB, but you don't have any symptoms of tuberculosis. So hence the reason for the treatment regimens to be very, very long.
Yeah, and also adhered to. You've spoken about the multi-drug resistant TB. I think something that's popping up now in my mind fairly often as you're talking is, if we have learned something new over the last process, obviously we've had the collective scientific and intellectual might focused on creating a COVID vaccine. Do you think we've progressed in terms of how we're going to approach TB and how we develop treatments for that? Have things moved forward with this? Because I would imagine TB's been a distant second priority over the last 2 or 3 years. How has COVID affected where we're going? Is there some light at the end of the tunnel that we might be actually seeing the benefit of having this collective push towards better vaccines, better treatment?
Absolutely. And the one thing that you touched on is TB became the neglected child of infectious
child,
diseases. So money wasn't invested in the same way as it was for COVID because it's a third world, low income country problem. It's not an American or first world country problem. So that's the one big thing. The second thing is TB runs parallel to HIV. So it's a co-pandemic of HIV and tuberculosis. So if somebody has TB, we need to exclude that they aren't HIV positive because then they require treatment with antiretroviral treatment for the HIV as well. And when you are HIV positive, you need to exclude tuberculosis. and the big thing is, if you take somebody who is HIV negative, take somebody who's HIV positive, the person being HIV positive has a 20 times higher chance of developing tuberculosis as opposed to when they are negative. And in South Africa, the last decade, as far as I can remember, in South Africa, tuberculosis have been the #1 cause of death in South Africa.
How do we address this then? You know, I quite flippantly said, oh, it's a socio-economic problem. Is it that? Is it our reach? Is it an understanding? Is it the importance of days like World TB Day where people are talking about it? Are we getting it right, or how far off the mark are we in South Africa?
Well, I think it's most definitely has roots embedded in socioeconomic components and parts of South Africa as well. And I believe if there is a strong will, as there was for antiretroviral treatment for HIV, we can actually overcome tuberculosis as well. But if you think about it, if you have to eat 10 or 12 or 20 tablets a day, but you don't have food, I mean...
You don't have transport, you don't have water, you don't have food.
I mean, how do you take medications which causes severe side effects, and in the meantime, not taking those medications, you actually infect your family and people sharing your environment as well. So it's a horrible,
we start out with a medical discussion and now it's suddenly become a wonderful exercise in privilege. Just think about that for a second and realize just how privileged you are in your own current situation. Such an interesting topic this morning. We are talking World TB Day, commemorated on the 24th of March. We're going to talk bigger picture in just a moment.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us as we wrap up what has been a really interesting and I think a vitally important discussion ahead of World TB Day. That's ahead of the annual commemoration on the 24th of March. Now, HIV and infectious diseases expert and our good friend, Dr. Emil Reid, he has shared his very extensive expertise and knowledge with us in this area. And we're now joined by one of our own, our Expresso family members who has actually gone through having TB himself. Welcome to Sebastian Newman, who is a part of our social media team and a part of our social set. You've been a gateway to the social world in Cape Town for the longest time, but great to have you on the couch as well. Thanks for sticking around, Doc. How did this come about? Walk us through when you were diagnosed and what were you feeling and experiencing at the time?
Cool. So I'm going to give you a short version of a very long story.
Okay.
End of 2014, I just started a new job. Right? So you know when you start a new job, you want to do the most, you want to be there, and now you get sick, but now you don't want to miss out days, so now you're like, I'm just going to go to the chemist and get what I need, I know what I need to get. Anyway, eventually, went to the doctor very close to work, and he was like, oh no, you've got a flu, here's some medication for the flu. A week later, flu was still not going away, he's like, okay, I I think you've got bronchitis. I'm like, okay. Week later, still nothing. He's like, it's a viral infection. So my manager at the time was like, listen, your health comes first. Please take the day off and go to your GP. So I go to my GP, and my GP is like, I'm telling him the whole story. And also at this time, I'm weighing like 40 kgs, firstly, at 19 years old. And I'm like quite tall, so like that's like weird. And then also there was these stairs at work, and I couldn't walk up like 3 steps, and then I needed to like stand still. So now you're like, what is going on? Went for the X-ray. X-ray comes back, and he's like, exactly what I thought. You've got TB.
TB. And that's because that's something that you kind of, I was saying, like, joking with the doctor, like, I perceive that to be a miner's disease from the 1960s, you know, not something that's, how did you feel? How did you react to the news?
Exactly what you're saying. There's this like stigma around it, like certain illnesses or
For others.
in others. Like
Yeah.
I can never get that. So I think the biggest thing for me was not me, like this can't be happening to me. And like also trying to not tell my mind what my body's going through. Because again, 19 years old, fresh, you want to do
You're
things.
indestructible at
But
19.
you literally couldn't, I couldn't even like get up. Like there were days where I couldn't get out of bed. Like my body was so weak. And it was like, you want to do things, but you just can't do it. And I think that for me was...
I mean, docs highlighted the fact that the treatment process is quite long and extensive, even more so if you get a drug-resistant TB. What was that treatment process going through? What was that like, and how did your body respond to it?
So also, like, I want to say, like, this illness humbles you because you can have all of the money in the world, right? You can have the best medical aid. You need to go there to your local clinic and you need to go sit every day, at least for that first month. You need to go in every day. So now this is also a thing. But
So
my mom was there with
disruptive,
me through the whole process, so just thanks, Mom.
Props, Mom.
And then a month later, they gave me then a month's supply because they come and do a home visit. And then my mom had to sign the card every day to make sure that I took the treatment. Because I think a lot of people also are very much in denial about it. Yeah. So they don't want to, say, oh, I've got TB or I'm going through this. And so now they just go out there and they still have it and now you're infecting other people. When the cure's there.
But now people are going to be looking at you thinking it's actually cool to get TB because...
I don't think it's cool.
and you know,
But
Graham,
you've got to break that stigma,
and the other thing, how does Mom actually know that he's taking his medication?
Yeah.
And Mom will tell you because his urine is orange. It's like neon orange. And some people, you know, that wear contact lenses, they struggle because their tears is orange and can actually stain their contact lenses. And that's why when you have TB and taking your anti-tuberculous treatment, don't wear a white shirt because
Your sweat will actually be orange. Oh,
can
my
actually
word.
stain your
That's one
your
thing
shirt
also
as well.
is like you sweat all
all the time. You sleep with like a towel underneath you.
You wake up in like...
I'll put this to both of you from flip sides of the coin here. Some advice for someone that is going through what you went through, Bass. What advice would you have for someone who's having to go through what sounds like a pretty intense treatment process?
So once I was fully recovered, Tamara Green, our previous Miss South Africa, she also came out with her story.
Yes.
And she spoke about the fact that her campaign was Break the Stigma. And in the final words of what she said, it costs you nothing to get your treatment and to go for your test. But if you don't go, it can cost your life. And I mean, that is like...
That is brilliant.
Brilliant. And I mean, like, it's so simple. Go and do it. You can still have a normal life. I mean, I continued working after getting my treatment. And, like, it's okay. It's not a death sentence. So go there and do what you need to do.
And the sooner you get diagnosed, the sooner you can get access to treatment, the sooner you can get better. The longer you allow this process to continue, the more damage you're actually going to sit with, particularly long-standing problems, cavitatory lung disease, not being able to breathe. And when that happens, I mean, you're going to sit with a lung condition your whole life through.
With successful treatment, should there be long-term effects? Because when you look at what happens to the lungs, surely there is a knock-on effect.
There's almost always residual damage. The extent of the damage depends on when the diagnosis was made. And obviously being young, being healthy, and getting a diagnosis much sooner as opposed to later, that's why it looks this good.
Yeah. See, even ridiculously good-looking people can get
Yeah.
TB. Break
Yeah.
that stigma, man. Break that stigma. No, thank you for opening up about this and speaking out. Thank you for some absolute gems today. It's been around for 100 years. I think we know the solutions are there. It's up to us to ensure early detection and that we look after each other. A good starting point, spread the word, break the stigma. It's World Tuberculosis Day in 2 days' time. Do what you can to spread the word and look after yourself.